this tutorial I'm going to demonstrate how you would actually go about constructing a misty mountain landscape like this. This video is supported by my patrons over at Patreon. If you're interested to know more about that, please check the description, and also there'll be a link at the end of the video. Okay, with this background I'm going to demonstrate how using layers is really going to be very, very beneficial. First thing I'm going to do is create the background layer. I don't want to use the background colour, I might want to do something more sophisticated with it later on. So I'm going to choose a neutral colour that I really want to have as an important part of the piece, and that is sort of between the blue and the green, and it's a very greyed out version of it. Let's go back to it, and I'm going to then just fill in this layer. So I'm on a medium air brush, I'm going to turn it way up and just fill in the whole of that quite simply. I'm going to create another layer now. I've pre-chosen a particular kind of blue that I quite like, and I'm just going to create like a very light version of it. We'll just check that it's visible, and it is. I might even want to do a lighter version of that, so I'll take it more towards the white. And I just want to create the very distant sort of background mountains at this point. So I might have them really being quite massive and tall in the background, like that. I'm not too worried about the overall shape at the moment. I can always amend and adjust that later on. I just want to get something in there for now. And that will do. So I can always just fill in some of this as well. I'm going to stick with the same kind of blue, but I'm going to make a darker version of it now. I might take it quite a few steps forward. So that's the really distant one. And now we're going to get a much more significantly closer set of mountains. I'm going to add another layer. Again, I'm going to move it to be darker. The layer, I'm going to make it even darker. That obscuring the one behind it. Not always going to be neatly uniform. Dealing with nature here, obviously doesn't play by rules all the time. And then for the real foreground mountain, I'm going to have it really quite dark. Maybe just have a slope coming in from the edge here, like so. Okay, so that's my basic structure, but I'm now going to start showing you how you can use elements like mist and light reflecting and warmer colours as also to add a bit more depth to it. So the first thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to add another layer. I'm going to go for a really darker version at this point. So this is going to be like the darkest one, really the closest one to the viewer, to the camera if you're seeing it in terms of being like a photo. Maybe another bump here, maybe another bit that comes up here, in fact, like that. Okay, so that already gives you a sense of distance, an illusion of distance, but I'm going to further use elements like mist to really exaggerate the point. So I'm just going to go back onto my neutral colour here, which was the first colour I used for the sky, and go back onto my layers. So I'm going to go down a layer, so it's going to be this one, not the most foreground one. And I'm going to go onto my soft airbrush at this point and reduce the opacity down to almost nothing, so it might be like at 1%, say, and I'm going to start gradually introducing it down here. Now, because it's the layer behind the most foreground one, you're not going to see it appear here. You just go on and start seeing it appear on the next layer. I might just turn it up slightly, it was even lower than 1%. So I want to do this very gradually. I really want to actually start obscuring some of the lower points in that mountain. I think it would be quite dramatic to exaggerate the mist. So some of the peaks just crop up out of it, and some of the lower points get totally obscured. So I'm keeping it quite soft and obviously trying to keep it mist-like and fluffy at this point. That'll do for now. I'm just going to move on to the next layer, which will be this one here. So I can continue adding some sort of mist effects, maybe just a touch up there. Remember, the mist is going to have a certain natural sort of level of its own, so you don't want to overdo it and have it going too high up. I'm just going to go to the next layer, maybe more gradually affecting it here. If I a low-lying mist, so it needs to be really bright at the bottom perhaps. Maybe I need to go back on those other layers. In fact, I could really exaggerate the point. Maybe just try and get rid of that area completely, so only the bits that pop up out of it are visible. Let's go for a really strong atmospheric look to it. Now the nearer it gets, the rounder some of those misty shapes might be, but as it gets more into the distance it's going to flatten out. So you might get a sense of a rounder shape here, closer to. Not too much, you don't want to exaggerate to a silly point, but I'm going to go back onto this layer. I'll show you which one it is there. I want to maybe just get rid of some of these areas again. So if I decided that I wanted to still change the shapes of some of these, that's not a problem. I can go, for example, back onto not this one, but the one behind it. I'll just delete it so you can see it. I can then go back onto my airbrush, select the colour that I want to start modifying, turn the opacity back up, and I can start really getting to grips with some of these little tiny bumps and details and just getting it the way that I want, especially at the sort of the top edge of them. They're going to be more darker, richer version of it, and then it fades down. So again, I'm going to go to the next layer. The most difficult thing about this is just keeping track of which layer you're actually working on. So you don't want to make too many, because it will become a bit of a nightmare. So always just turn the tick box on and off so you can really identify which layer you're working on. If I've identified it's that one, I'm going to just select the darkest bit of it, and then I can start really kind of picking out some more shapes. I can always, with the smudge tool, start to blend that in a bit more as well later on. Just bring it out a bit more. So I'm just using the smudge tool now, and I can just start to blend it in, and you get some of the wispy, actually benefits really, this sense of wispy cloud and mist. Maybe it could wisp up in fact if there's a slight bit of wind got to it. Might even go back and do the same kind of thing for this layer. Again, check which layer you're working on. So it's this layer I want to affect. I'm going to just turn the brush size up, maybe just start to get a sense of it breaking up and getting a bit more textural in that area as well. I think I want to change this sort of misty level layer. It's a bit too much of a straight line, so I'm just checking again the layer that I've been working on. So I might just want to again further sort of rough that up a little bit more. Okay, I'm going to just move my focus over to the main mountains in the background. Make sure I'm on the right layer. Now these are going to be the biggest mountains because not only do they look bigger, but they are the furthest away, so they must be relatively huge compared to the other mountains on the piece. So I've just moved to this neutral colour that I did for the background. I'm going to use that to add some of the sort of snowy details. Now the snow obviously is white as you look at it, or it's a reflective colour. So it's going to reflect the colour of the general ambient atmosphere and light. So the general background lighting colour is going to be, some of it is going to be this kind of neutral colour. So I'm going to have it affecting certain areas of this highest mountain range. So I'm going to turn the opacity down. I'm still again using the soft airbrush. I'm just going to start putting in some areas, especially at the top. I'm going to have it fading out towards the bottom, partly because of the mist, partly because snow only appears at the top of a mountain anyway, generally. So it's not going to be on these ones so much, maybe light hitting it, but not really so much in the way of snow. So I'm not too worried about the texture at the minute and the overlapping layers. I can always use the smudge tool later to really blend in. I guess if you were using kind of oil paints, you could, happily blend your oil paints together as well. So I'm just trying to get a bit of a sense of texture. The general light's coming from above, obviously, So the top sort of plateaus and surfaces are going to catch the light. You can get flat areas where obviously the snow will settle as well. You might get a whole flat sort of side area where you get a lot of snow, and then you might just get some outcrops of rock that interrupt. I'm going to use another light source in this as well, so it'll really pick up some of the details. You can always select the actual darker colour of that mountain and start to pick out some details if I wanted to create more kind of rock structures in there anyway, not a problem. So anything that sticks up as a kind of rocky structure, you're going to get more breaks in the snow, and then you might get a flatter area that doesn't have so many breaks in it like that. So the steeper inclines, steeper edges of a mountain, you get less of a flat plateau of snow. You might just get some little highlights as it settles on particular areas. Then you get another flatter area and it might just fill in more of it. Use this smudge tool, which is a great way of blending things in. I will return to that and perhaps add some more highlights and textures too, but I'm going to move my focus now to some of the more foreground areas. So I'm going to go back onto my brush. I'm going to keep with the neutral colour, but I'm really going to turn that opacity down. I don't want it to be too dramatic. I need to make sure I'm on the right layers as well. So I'm going for that layer next. And I just want to start picking out some of the rock structures. I'm not going to have so much snow, so you're going to get a lot of more jagged kind of shapes appearing here. But again, I don't really want to go overboard with this. I'm going to introduce a sort of warmer colour scheme to this too. And that's when you're going to get some more of the dramatic highlights as well. So I just don't want it to be looking too flat. I just need to create some breaking of the textures up here, and that's what I'm essentially doing at this point. So I don't want it to look bright like snow, I just want it to look not flat. Again, just double check I'm still on the right layer. If I want to use this colour, I can then turn the opacity up and start creating just some sharper details. I might decide it looks too blurry, in which case I might just create some really sharp pointy bits. Another useful aspect of what I'm doing is I've not got the opacity turned to full, so if I'm adding just some extra little details, it looks like it's part of the same general mountain area, but just a slightly more kind of further back detail like that. So you're adding sort of layers even within that layer at that point. So I might do another area there, for example, that's going to look further back than it does here. That will do for that layer. I'm just going to move to another layer, so I'm working on this one now. Now that is much more closer to, so it really needs some sharper details. Make sure I actually have selected it. I'm going to pick the strongest aspect of that layer, and I'm just going to really start adding some sharper bits to it. It needs to be nicely in focus. Again, I've not got the opacity on full, so you can create a bit of a sense of slight texture and layers, things going further back there too. Now I'm going to move to the next closest layer, and again I'm going to repeat the same thing. It's not on full opacity, so I just need to be careful of not messing with the misty areas. So I'm just going to make sure I'm on the correct layer, select the darkest colour there, and I'm just going to start sharpening up some of those details again. Again, it's not on full opacity, so I can create a slight sense that some bits of it are going to be slightly further away. That's good for our purposes. It's all about layering, adding depth really at this point. So essentially we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 layers, but on each layer you are creating sort of layers within that layer really, like that. Might even just do a little bit of a detail bobbing out there as well. Maybe another one here, I can blend that in. And then I'm going to move to the absolute nearest layer here. Now, because that's the very closest one, there might be some real extra details. So there might be, I'm not going to too clearly define them, but there might be things like trees. Definitely going to get something there though. So I've created an extra layer and I'm going to start introducing a kind of warm colour scheme into this. You could leave it pretty much like that, but it is very monochrome at this point. And I do want to get a warmth into the piece. Now I'm making sure I'm on a separate layer, so if I make mistakes, I'm not happy with it, it's easy enough to delete. I just want to create, I'm not even caring about it intersecting or it going over the top of the mountains at this point. I can easily delete it or erase those areas. Just want it to start to have some sort of areas where it cuts across in sort of stripe shapes, and then I'm going to have a lighter area within that. And then I can go with the eraser and I can sort of reclaim the mountain range that's got a bit lost in the mix there. If I'm not quite sure where it was, I can easily just remind myself and pick it back out. And really, you know, it doesn't matter, I can sort of re-establish in shapes that, you know, I feel at this point are worthy of sticking out. So I'm still creating every shape as we go along, I'm just re-establishing some sense of a sharper line across here. I can look back to what I did initially. It was kind of vague, so I'm quite happy with that. I do think I want an even lighter area here, so I'm just going to really intensify up the light source from this area. Maybe go all the way to white, just in a certain area. Might decide I need to just re-establish some of these shapes because I want those also to be broken up in areas. So we've got the light coming through, but then this cloud that goes over the top and obscures it has its own kind of edge, which might be textured too. It's starting to feel like it makes a bit more sense now. So again, I just need to re-establish the mountain range because again, I've just gone into it a little bit strongly with the white. I want to use some of that colour, having said that, to pick out certain highlights, but I think it's important just to determine where the edge of the mountain is first again. Okay, so I'm just going to go to the salmony colour again, and I'm still on the same layer, and I'm going to start it needs to have an impact in nearer areas too, so I'm just going to turn the opacity down. So it might be that there are ledges and shapes that it picks up on that are closer to. In fact, that is too strong. That particular area, it needs to be a slightly lighter version, I think. More likely to affect it here because it's more likely to be in the shadow here, but in the centre section, because it's straight down as well, it's more likely to just catch the top of some of the misty areas. Again, remember it's not as flat as it is over here, so you might just get some shapes like that it just catches. So now I've got this strong light source, I'm just going to start using that to define, in fact I'll just make a sharper brush. I'm going to use it to start defining some of the edges of things that I want to pick out. It's obviously going to impact on things that are more in this zone, in the sort of central zone, less so on the outer edges. I'm also going to have it impacting perhaps just one or two areas in the more sort of foreground shapes. I want to use it subtly though, I don't really want to overdo things. Just suggestions of it here and there. Anywhere we've got maybe a flatter area like this and it breaks through into this section, then it might just touch this area, but again I want to use it subtly, I don't want to overdo its impact. So I'm just concentrating on this sort of central area, not really extending it to anywhere outside of that. I guess in some ways it's a bit like when you have reflections in water, it tends to reflect it straight down, especially if it's snow. You know, things that are directly above it are going to filter down into that area, but otherwise its impact is going to be far more subtle. Another area perhaps where you need to start just a little bit of suggestion of texture might be in this area. It is quite flat. You can spend a long time just putting in details on here. It is the most foreground area, so in theory you could really go to town on this. I don't want to spend too long on this. I just want to create the overall effect and leave it like that for now, but if this was a finished piece, to be honest, I could be quite happy leaving it like that with just a slight suggestion of texture in there, but depends really how far you want to push the actual image. For me, I'm just happy to give a slight suggestion that there is stuff going on in there. I guess the only thing that would have left to do is start going back over some of these layers, and just like that layer for example, there are bits here that need just smudging in slightly. Am I on the right layer? No, I'm not. Where has it gone? There it is. To actually select the layer, it would help, and if I just blur it in slightly, especially on that bottom edge of it, like so. I'm going to leave it there for now. I hope you've enjoyed watching this tutorial. Please check out my other tutorials. I do all sorts of different elements. I do fire, water, skies, and I'm going to do lots more in each of those series. So I'm going to build up hopefully quite a massive catalogue of different examples of how you do different types of each of those different sort of elemental forces. Really appreciate it if you could show me support in any way by subscribing, commenting, and also paying my Patreon site a visit. Thanks very much for watching. I shall catch you back here again.